Welcome to Coffee Talk. I am your host, MISHUMA, SABA, M.SABA, and this is our Cultural Variety Podcast. Stay tuned. Peace, 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 peace. And welcome to the show, Coffee Talk. This is the show, Coffee Talk Podcast, the variety show. And I'm your host, MISHUMA, SABA, M.SABA. And this is our Culture Variety Podcast show. How y'all doing tonight? Sorry about the little glare. I'm working on that as we speak. There we go. There we go. Give me one moment. How's everyone doing tonight? Today is February 1st. And you know what they say around these parts? They say it's Black History Month. You know, we all know it to be year-round, 365. We do know that. But hey, you know, you guys celebrate everything else. So, hey, we're going to celebrate ours. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's 31 days, 30 days, or 28, or 365, which it is. So happy Black History Month, everyone. During this time and during this month, you know, I know you get busy throughout the year. But I believe that you should take time to not to focus on what the schools may or may not be doing, but to be teaching your child, sit around the table and tell your child stories, whether they're your family stories about your ancestors or, you know, cultural studies. But sit around the table, sit around at home, wherever you're comfortable at, and talk to your children about our history, not his story. You know what I'm talking about? But other than that, I'm happy to be here. Happy to see you all. As you pop on in. And tonight I got a great show for you. Tonight's show is going to be about Mrs. Rosa Lee Ingram. You know, so we're going to definitely go back in time and talk about that situation. As you can see, she and her children are the backdrop on the green screen behind us. And she has a fascinating story to discuss. And, you know, so may you guys enjoy the reading that we're going to have tonight. We are open for comments. So if you want to leave a comment, you want to hit the like button, you want to share the video, we do appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and much gratitude. And let's go ahead and dive right on in. Now, if this is your first time appearing on the show, or actually seeing the show, Coffee Talk, we never start the show without giving it its flavor. So tonight's flavor is you can overcome any task that you're willing to put your mind to. So that's tonight's flavor. You can overcome any task that you're willing to put your mind to. All right, so let's go ahead and get on in. Again, thank you for tuning in to the show, Coffee Talk. I am your host, MISHUMA, SABA, M.SABA, and this is our Culture Variety Podcast show. And tonight we're going to be talking about Rosa Lee Ingram. Let's begin. Rosa Lee Ingram was an African-American sharecropper and widowed mother of 12 children who was at the center of one of the most explosive capital punishment cases in U.S. history. In the 1940s, she became an icon for the civil rights and social justice movement. Ingram farmed adjoining lots with white sharecropper John Ed Stratford. And on November 4th, 1947, Stratford confronted Ingram, accusing her of allowing her livestock to roam freely onto his land. When Ingram reminded Stratford that both the livestock and the land were owned by their landlord, he struck her with a gun. Several of Ingram's sons came to her defense, and Stratford was killed by the blows to the head. That's what happens when you pistol whip somebody's mother. Ingram, along with 4 of her sons, Charles, age 17, Wallace, age 16, Sammy Lee, age 14, and James, age 12, were initially arrested. Although James was later released, Charles was tried separately and was released at the conclusion of his trial due to insufficient evidence. According to Charles H. Martin, this underscored the circumstantial nature of the evidence against his mother and brothers. The trial of Rosa Lee, Wallace, and Sammy Lee lasted just one day. Held on January 26, 1948 in Ellaville, Georgia. They were found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. Nationwide uprisings against the verdict resulted in the sentences being commuted to life sentences. Further public uprisings continued against the remaining harshness of the commuted convictions. Although the prosecution suggested that the confronting between Stratford and Ingram across from a conflict over livestock, later accounts suggested that Stratford was enraged because Ingram had repeatedly objected to his sexual harassment of her. So what they're saying is that it wasn't really over the livestock at all. But what happened is that John Edward Stratford was trying to make sexual advances at Mrs. Rosa Lee Ingram, trying to take it. And her children came to her defense. Let's continue reading. Although the prosecution suggested that the confrontation between Stratford and Ingram arose from a conflict over livestock, later accounts suggested that Stratford was enraged because Ingram had repeatedly objected to his sexual harassment of her. The defense argued that Ingram's sons killed Stratford in self-defense. The judge presiding over the case was Judge W.M. Harper, the attorney representing Ingram, and appointed her to the morning trial was S. Hawkins Dykes. The juror for the trial was an all-white, all-male jury. The sentencing of Ingram and 2 of her sons to die in the electric chair was handed down by an all-white, all-male jury on February 7th, 1948. When their executions were scheduled for February 27th, 1948, less than 3 weeks later, the U.S. erupted in protest against the trial and sentences, which had been conducted in haste and secrecy. So they was actually going, into the judge's chambers, already deciding what they wanted to do with Miss Rosa Ingram and her sons. In response to national protests led by Sojourners for Truth and Justice, their sentences was commuted to life on April 1948. So because the protesters kept fighting for her rights, it got knocked down from being being awarded to be in the electric chair to be killed, the death penalty, to just being in life in jail. Let's continue reading. A second wave of protests ensued after the Georgia Supreme Court upheld the Ingram's life sentences. In 1952, despite continued protests from civil rights organizations on the basis of extenuating circumstances, the Georgia Pardon and Parole Board refused to free Ingram and her 2 sons. When Sojourners for Truth and Justice came to visit Georgia Governor Herman Thalmood in January of 1953 to plead for the Ingram's release, they were turned away by the governor's wife, who told them the governor was out hunting. In 1955, the Ingrams were again denied parole. The state board gave no reason for the denial. After multiple subsequent requests were denied, on August 26, 1959, Ingram and her sons were paroled and released from prison. But I want to go back to that paragraph where how the governor's wife just came out and said, my husband's gone hunting. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But it just shows what type of code that people that commit wrongdoings be on. I mean, look at the trial and the sentences. They were in haste and they were secrecy. It was in the judge's chambers. Following Ingram's release, she lived in Atlanta, Georgia until her death. What was the civil rights impact of the case? The Ingrams were defended by the Civil Rights Congress, as well as Sojourners for Truth and Justice. As historian Eric S. McDuffie notes, the case galvanized Black left feminists, highlighting the specific forms of oppression experienced by poor Black women, as well as foregrounding the history of white men's sexual violence against Black women. According to McDuffie, Ingram's case represented in glaring terms the interlocking systems of oppression suffered by African American women, the painful memories of and the continued day-to-day sexual violence committed against Black women's bodies by white men, the lack of protection for and the disrespect of Black motherhood, the economic exploitation of Black working class women, and the disenfranchisement of Black women in the Jim Crow South. Black progressive women were the leaders of the global campaign to free the Ingrams. That's a real ill story. That's a real ill story, because the man was trying to say it was because of the cattle. Going from off of her land onto his land. Yet it was her landlord that she paid rent to his land. So right there, that defutes his argument. Mr. Stratford's argument. In reality, we know what time it was. Mr. Stratford was trying to make sexual advances to Miss Rosa Lee Ingram. He got frustrated because he was getting turned down. He didn't know how to handle that. So he wanted to go ahead and use his power over her. So far gone as to use a weapon to beat on her. Well, he got an awakening that day, didn't he? You don't put your hands on nobody's mother. Period. People are willing to die for that. Period. And so that's what happened in this case. Her sons came out. Charles, age 17, Wallace, age 16, Sammy, age 14, and James, age 12. And they defended their mother like they were supposed to. So this is the story of Rosa Lee Ingram. If you'd like to hear more content like this throughout this month, continue to tune in to Coffee Talk. Go ahead and hit the like button, share the video, leave a comment on what your thoughts are about the story of Rosa Lee Ingram. Because her children defended her against the sexual advances of John Ed Stratford. She was looking at the electric chair, her and her child. Or should I say children? But people fought for her. People protested for her. Now I'm like, I got a love-hate relationship when it comes to protests. I done seen some work and I done seen some not work. I done seen some staged and I done seen some not staged. So I'll leave that with you. But this is Coffee Talk Podcast variety show. And I am your host, MISHUMA SABA, M.SABA. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm going to throw up that universal peace sign to y'all. Thank you. Peace. Thank you for supporting the show. We gone.
Audio Jungle.
Welcome to Coffee Talk. I am your host, MISHUMA SABA, M.SABA, and this is our Cultural Variety Podcast. Stay tuned.